Hassan, just a regular guy working a decent office job in some soulless corporate park. It's not winsome, but it pays the bills. The work is fine, the coffee is mediocre, and the people, for the most part, are normal. For years, this place was my predictable, stable 9 to 5. Our team was a solid mix of people. A few older guys nearing retirement, some younger guys like me, and a handful of women who were all cool. We had a good rhythm. We'd do our work, joke around a bit, complain about deadlines, and go home. There was no drama, no politics, just spreadsheets, emails, and the occasional project that was actually interesting. Our manager was an old-timer named Frank. He was fair, didn't play favorites, and his only real rule was get your work done and don't cause problems. It was a simple, effective system. We all got along. The guys would talk about sports or video games. The women would talk about whatever they were into. And sometimes we'd all just complain about the terrible coffee together. It was a professional yet relaxed environment. Nobody felt like they had to walk on eggshells. In the corner of the office, we had Trey. Trey was the IT guy assigned to our floor. Super smart, quiet, and had this permanent look of mild amusement on his face. Like he was watching a sitcom only he could see. He rarely talked unless it was work-related, but when he did, it was usually some dry, sarcastic comment that was brutally accurate. Life was okay. Monotonous, but okay. Then, about a few months back, Frank announced his retirement. We threw him a little party, got him a cake, and wished him well. For a couple of weeks, we were manager-less. It was peaceful. Corporate eventually sent out an email. A new manager had been hired from outside the company. Her name was Jet. The email had a little bio about her. Talked about her dynamic leadership style and her passion for fostering inclusive and forward-thinking workplace cultures. A few of us kind of rolled our eyes at the corporate buzzwords, but whatever. A new boss is a new boss. We just hoped she'd be normal. That hope did not last long. Her first day she walks in, you could feel the air change. She had this intensely fake, bright smile plastered on her face, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She called a mandatory team meeting first thing. We all shuffled into the conference room. She starts her introduction speech. It was a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing with the maximum number of syllables. It was all synergizing our deliverables, shifting paradigms, and other stuff that makes you want to fall asleep. But then her language started to get specific. She started talking about the need to deconstruct the invisible architecture of the traditional office space. She said she wanted to challenge the unexamined biases that are baked into our daily interactions. I remember looking over at one of the older guys on the team, Dave. He just looked completely baffled. Jet then said she wanted to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves, but with a twist. We also had to state something we were going to do to help dismantle the patriarchy in the workplace. I'm not kidding. That's the word she used. Patriarchy. In our boring little office that sold accounting software, the room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The women on the team looked just as uncomfortable as the men. One of them, a sweet lady named Carol, just stammered and said she'd try to speak up more in meetings. Jet beamed at her. Excellent, Carol. A wonderful goal. It got to Dave. He's a guy in his late 50s just trying to make it to retirement. He just goes, I'm Dave. I've been here 20 years. I'll try to use less paper. Jet's smile tightened. That's an environmental goal, Dave. We're talking about social structures here. He just stared at her blankly. The whole thing was excruciating. When it was my turn, I just mumbled my name and said I'd listen more actively. It was the most neutral thing I could think of. She gave me a suspicious look, but moved on. The meeting ended, and we all walked out of there feeling like we'd just been in a bizarre dream. The easygoing atmosphere of our office evaporated in that 1 hour. The next few weeks were a slow, painful descent into madness. Jet made it clear that she had a specific worldview, and we were all going to live by it. Meetings became minefields. If a man had an idea, she'd listen with a skeptical expression, then immediately turn to a woman on the team and ask, "And what do you think? Do you feel he's accurately capturing the situation without overshadowing other voices?" It was insane. We were talking about server migration, not social justice. One time, a senior engineer, Mark, proposed a really clever solution to a coding bug we'd been stuck on for a week. Jet just nodded slowly and said, "Thank you for that input, Mark." 5 minutes later, a junior female programmer, Sarah, basically repeated Mark's idea, but used slightly different words. Jet clapped her hands together. Brilliant, Sarah. Absolutely brilliant. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking we need. See everyone? A fresh perspective. Mark just sat there, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. He worked on that solution all weekend. After that, the guys on the team started talking less and less in meetings. Why bother? Your idea would either be ignored or stolen. It became a common sight. Jet would ask a question, and all the men would suddenly become intensely interested in their notepads. The office became divided, not by our choice, but by hers. She started assigning all the high-profile, interesting projects to the women. The men were given the tedious, thankless tasks: maintenance, bug fixes, data entry. The stuff that keeps the lights on, but gets you no recognition. My workload became a monotonous grind of updating old code and running diagnostics. Work I could do in my sleep. When I asked for more challenging assignments, Jet gave me a patronizing smile. She told me it was important for the historically marginalized members of the team to have a chance to shine. She said this to me, a guy whose parents immigrated here with nothing. But sure, I'm the face of historical privilege. The camaraderie we used to have was gone. The casual chats by the coffee machine stopped. The guys started eating lunch at their desks just to avoid the break room. It felt like we were being treated like a problem that needed to be managed, not as valued members of the team. We were all miserable. The quality of our work started to dip because morale was in the toilet. But Jet didn't seem to notice or care. In her reports to upper management, she probably wrote about how she was transforming the culture and empowering new voices. The breaking point came about a month into her reign of terror. It started in the break room. The break room used to be neutral territory, a place to get away from your desk for 5 minutes. One morning, I walked in to get my coffee, and I stopped dead in my tracks. The walls were covered in posters, brightly colored, professionally printed posters with passive-aggressive slogans. One, right above the microwave, had a picture of a guy sitting on a subway seat. The text read, "Is your posture taking up too much space? Check your privilege." Another one by the sink showed a silhouette of a man interrupting a woman. The caption, "Heap eating isn't a contribution. Let her speak." My eyes scanned the room. There were more. Before you mansplain, ask yourself, is it possible she already knows more than you? It was a full-on ideological assault. We were being lectured and scolded in the one place we were supposed to relax. But the worst one, the one that made my blood run cold, was right above the coffee machine. It was a picture of a cute, stylish mug. On the mug, in big, bold letters, it said, "Male Tears." I just stood there, staring at it. This wasn't just corporate nonsense anymore. This was open contempt. She was mocking us, laughing at our discomfort. A few of my other male colleagues walked in, and the same sequence of reactions played out on their faces. Confusion, then disbelief, then quiet, simmering anger. No one said a word. We just got our coffee and walked back to our desks in silence. The message was crystal clear. This is not a safe space for you. You are the problem. I tried to ignore it for a few days. I told myself to just keep my head down, do my work, and not cause trouble. But it was impossible. Every time I went to get a cup of coffee, that Male Tears poster was staring me in the face. It felt like a deliberate act of psychological warfare. I decided I had to say something. I couldn't just sit there and take it. I wasn't going to be aggressive. I was going to be calm, professional, and reasonable. I caught Jet as she was walking back from a meeting. "Jet, do you have a minute?" She turned with that fake customer service smile. "Of course, Hassan. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "It's about the new posters in the break room." Her smile widened. "Ah, yes. Aren't they thought-provoking? I thought it was time we started some important conversations." I kept my tone even. "Well, to be honest, some of us find them a bit hostile. They seem to be targeting one specific group of employees, and it's making people feel uncomfortable." I watched her face as I spoke. The smile never wavered, but her eyes went hard and cold. She let out a little, condescending laugh. "Hassan," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "Sometimes, confronting our own privilege can feel uncomfortable. That's part of the process of growth." I tried again. "I understand that, but the Male Tears one, for example, it feels less like a conversation starter and more like an insult." She put a hand on her chest in mock surprise. An insult? Oh no, you've misinterpreted it completely. It's satire. It's meant to subvert the traditional power dynamics. Don't you see? I saw, all right. I saw that she had a pre-packaged excuse for everything, that she was never going to listen, that she enjoyed this. I don't think my colleagues see it as satire, I said quietly. It just feels like we're being collectively punished for something we didn't do. Her tone shifted instantly. The fake sympathy was gone, replaced by a sharp, icy edge. The goal of these initiatives is to create a workplace that is safe and welcoming for everyone, she said, as if reciting from a script. If you are feeling defensive, perhaps you should reflect on why that is. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the hallway. I felt completely defeated. I had tried to be reasonable. I had tried to handle it like an adult, and I had been dismissed like a child. I walked back to my desk, my mind racing. I felt trapped. HR would be a dead end. Jet was new, and she was an expert at using the right corporate language. They would see her as a progressive manager, and me as a disgruntled employee who couldn't handle change. I slumped in my chair, staring blankly at my monitor. That evening, I was one of the last people in the office. I went to the break room to rinse out my coffee mug. The posters were still there, looking even more obnoxious in the dim, empty office. As I was standing there, Trey, the IT guy, walked in. He didn't say anything. He just went to the fridge, got a can of soda, and leaned against the counter. He took a long sip, his eyes fixed on the Male Tears poster. After a full minute of silence, he spoke, without looking at me. "Catchy decor," he said, his voice flat and sarcastic. "Really ties the room together." Normally, I would have just given a weak laugh and left. But her condescending dismissal was still fresh in my mind. I found myself venting. "It's not just the posters, man. It's everything. The meetings, the project assignments. It's like we're not allowed to succeed here anymore." I told him about my conversation with Jet, how she had twisted my words and made me out to be the bad guy. Trey listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. "So, you tried the direct approach," he said. "You appealed to reason and professionalism." "Yeah," I said, feeling deflated. "A lot of good it did me." "It never does," Trey said, taking another sip of his soda. "People like her aren't interested in reason. Their ideology is a hammer, and every problem looks like a nail. And right now, we're the nail." His cynical validation was more comforting than I expected. It felt good to know I wasn't the only one who saw it. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Just quit?" Trey finally turned to look at me. There was a glint in his eye I hadn't seen before. "Quitting is what they want," he said. "They want to drive out everyone who doesn't fit their mold and replace them with people who think exactly like them. We don't quit." He paused, looking back at the posters. "You tried to fight her on her terms, in the open. That's a game that is rigged for us to lose," he continued. "She uses corporate policy and social justice language as a shield. You can't attack the shield." He crushed his empty soda can in one hand. "But people who build shields like that," he said, his voice dropping a little lower, "they always have something to hide behind them. They're always hypocrites." I didn't understand where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" Trey gave me a small, grim smile. "She uses her work computer for everything, her work email, her work chat," he said, tapping the side of his head. "As the IT administrator, it's my job to ensure all company assets are used appropriately, for security and compliance purposes, of course." A light bulb went on in my head. "You mean you can... I mean," Trey interrupted, his voice very precise, "that if a manager is creating what you described as a hostile work environment, there might be a digital paper trail of that unprofessional behavior. It would be my duty to find it if it exists." He let the words hang in the air. He wasn't suggesting anything illegal. Everything he was talking about was within the bounds of corporate IT policy. She was using company property. She had no expectation of privacy. A plan started to form, a crazy, risky plan. But it was better than sitting here and slowly suffocating under her regime. "Find it," I said. Trey nodded once. "I'll run some diagnostic audits tonight, for security." He walked out of the break room, leaving me alone with the posters. But for the first time in a month, they didn't seem so intimidating anymore. They just looked like the desperate actions of someone who was about to be exposed. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. The next day was one of the longest of my life. I walked into the office feeling a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. Every time I saw Jet walking around with her smug, self-satisfied look, I had to fight the urge to smile. The posters were still up in the break room, of course, a constant nagging reminder of why we were doing this. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentment. I saw Trey by the elevators. He just gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The message was clear: stay patient. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the conversation with Trey. Was this really going to work? What if we got caught? But then I'd remember Jet's condescending voice, telling me to reflect on my defensiveness, and my resolve would harden. This wasn't just a prank. It was a necessary correction. It was about restoring sanity to our workplace. Late that afternoon, I got a chat message from Trey. It just said, "Security audit complete. Come by when you have a sec." My heart started pounding. I waited a few minutes, trying to look casual, then got up and walked over to the IT corner. Trey's desk was tucked away in the back, a fortress of monitors and spare computer parts. He was typing away, not looking up as I approached. "Close the blinds," he said quietly. I reached over and tilted the cheap office blinds shut, casting his corner into shadow. He gestured for me to lean in. On one of his monitors was an open email client. I ran a keyword search on our server's outbound mail logs, he said in a low, clinical voice. Searched for terms that might indicate unprofessional conduct or the creation of a hostile environment. Words like toxic, privilege, mansplain, patriarchy. He pointed to the screen, and I found the jackpot. I leaned closer to read. It was a long email chain between Jet and someone who was clearly a close friend. The address was a non-work account. The emails were sent from her work address during office hours. Trey scrolled up to the beginning. The first emails were from Jet's first week. She was complaining to her friend about her new job. "You won't believe the amount of unchecked male energy in this place," one of them read. "It's like stepping back into the 1950s. I have so much work to do here." I felt a surge of anger. We had all been perfectly polite and welcoming to her. Trey scrolled down. It got worse, much worse. She started talking about her colleagues by name. She described Dave, the older guy, as a dinosaur who is probably afraid of women in authority. She called Mark, the engineer whose idea she stole, a classic example of a fragile male ego, thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. Then I saw my own name. "There's this one guy, Hassan," she wrote. "He's one of those quiet, intense types. Gives me the creeps. He's probably one of those guys who secretly resents women for breathing. I'm keeping my eye on him." I felt my face flush. It was a disgusting, baseless character assassination. But the worst part was the email she sent the day she put up the posters. She had taken a picture of the break room with her phone and attached it to the email. The message to her friend was triumphant. "Phase 1 of my re-education campaign is complete," she wrote. "I put up some educational art in the break room. You should see their faces. They're all walking around looking so confused and offended. It's absolutely priceless." My eyes locked onto the next sentence. "I just want to hold a little mirror up to their toxicity. It's time they understood what it feels like to be constantly judged and belittled. I love watching their sad, pathetic little faces as they pour their coffee under my Male Tears poster. It's the highlight of my day." I had to physically step back from the monitor. This wasn't just an HR violation. This was pure, malicious spite. She wasn't trying to educate anyone. She was enjoying our humiliation. She was getting a thrill out of making her own employees miserable. Trey looked at me, his expression grim. "That's what we're dealing with." "This is unbelievable," I whispered. "Believe it," he said. "People who virtue signal the loudest are usually the biggest hypocrites." He scrolled to the very bottom of the chain. Her friend's reply was just as bad, full of cheering Jet on and calling us a bunch of losers. "So," Trey said, leaning back in his chair, "we have the evidence. The question is, what's the most effective way to use it?" We talked for about an hour, weighing our options. We could go straight to Amy in HR. It was the correct thing to do. But we both knew how that could play out. A quiet internal investigation. Jet gets a slap on the wrist. She finds out who reported her, and she makes our lives a living hell until we quit. Corporate HR departments are designed to protect the company, not the employees. No, that wasn't good enough. What she did was public. Her punishment needed to be public. She humiliated us as a group. She needed to be held accountable in front of that same group. That's when the idea solidified. We use her own methods against her, I said. A role reversal. Trey's lips curved into a slow smile. Poetic justice. I like it. The plan was simple. We would do exactly what she did. We would take her words, her hateful, unprofessional words, and we would put them on the wall for everyone to see. We would replace her condescending propaganda with her own raw, unfiltered hypocrisy. We decided to stay late that night. Trey said he'd need to perform some server maintenance after hours, which was the perfect cover. Around 7 p.m., the office was finally empty. The cleaning crew had come and gone. It was just me and Trey. The only light came from our monitors and the emergency lights in the hallways. The silence was almost deafening. Trey used his master keycard to make sure all the floor access doors were locked. "All right," he said, "let's go to the art department." We walked over to the break room. Taking down her posters was incredibly satisfying. Each one I pulled off the wall felt like a small victory. I ripped the Male Tears poster off with particular relish and crumpled it into a ball. With the walls bare, the room already felt better, lighter. Next, we went back to Trey's desk. He had already selected the most damning quotes from her emails. We formatted them in a simple, bold font. No fancy graphics. We wanted her words to speak for themselves. Trey's office printer hummed to life, spitting out page after page of pure hypocrisy. Then came the final, crucial step. Trey composed a new email. The recipient was Amy, the head of HR. The subject line was professional. Formal complaint and evidence regarding hostile work environment. The body of the email was short and to the point. "Dear Amy, please find attached evidence of a sustained campaign of harassment and the creation of a hostile work environment by Manager Jet. The attached email chain was discovered during a routine security audit of company servers. We are forwarding this to you for immediate action." He signed it. A concerned employee. He attached the full, unredacted PDF of the entire email chain. Then he did something clever. He scheduled the email to be sent at 8:45 a.m. the next morning, right before Jet usually arrived. "Insurance," he said. "No matter what happens tomorrow, HR will have the full story. There's no way she can spin this." With that done, we took our stack of freshly printed papers and walked back to the break room. We put them up in the exact same spots where her posters had been. Over the coffee machine, we placed the sheet that read, "I love watching their sad, pathetic little faces." By the microwave, "You won't believe the amount of unchecked male energy in this place." On the main wall, "I'm just trolling these man babies. It's the highlight of my day." And for a personal touch, right on the front of the fridge, we put the one about me. "There's this one guy, Hassan, gives me the creeps." When we were done, we stood back and looked at our work. The room was no longer filled with vague, passive-aggressive accusations. It was filled with the specific, documented malice of one person. Our manager. It was perfect. We did a quick sweep of the office to make sure we left no trace, then we left. Walking out into the cool night air, I felt a profound sense of calm. We had done everything we could. Now, we just had to wait for the sun to come up. The next morning, I got to the office early. My stomach was in knots. I made a beeline for the break room. The papers were still there. A few of my colleagues were already in, trickling in one by one. The first person to see the new display was Carol, the nice older lady. She walked in, stopped, and her eyes went wide. She read one page, then another. A look of complete shock spread across her face. She looked over at me, her mouth slightly open, then quickly looked away. A couple of the other guys from my team came in. Their reaction was different. First confusion, then dawning realization, then slow, spreading grins. One of them, Kevin, let out a low whistle. "Whoa!" he said, shaking his head in disbelief. The news spread through the office like wildfire. People started finding excuses to walk past the break room. There was a constant low buzz of whispering. Nobody knew who did it, but everyone knew who had written it. The tone was unmistakable. I was at my desk, pretending to work, when I saw her. Jet walked in at 8:50 a.m., 5 minutes before our morning meeting. She was carrying her designer handbag and a ridiculously expensive-looking cup of coffee. She had her usual air of unearned superiority. She smiled condescendingly at a few people as she walked toward her office. Then she changed course and headed for the break room to drop off her lunch. This was it. I watched her walk toward the door. She pushed it open and stepped inside. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, I saw her figure through the small window in the break room door. She had frozen in place. She took a step closer to the wall, then another. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could see her body language. Her shoulders went stiff. Her head snapped from one paper to the next. A few other people had gathered in the hallway, pretending to be having a conversation. But really, we were all watching the show. Jet came storming out of the break room. Her face was a mask of pure white-hot rage. The fake smile was gone, replaced by a contorted snarl. Her eyes darted around the office, trying to find who was responsible. They landed on me for a second, and I made sure my expression was one of mild, innocent confusion. "Who did this?" she shrieked. Her voice was shrill. The entire office went silent. "Who is responsible for this?" Nobody said a word. People just stared at her. She pointed a trembling finger at the break room door. "This is a targeted harassment campaign. This is a violation of my privacy. This is a hate crime." She was completely losing it, unraveling in front of the entire department. Just as her tirade was reaching its peak, I saw a figure walking calmly but purposefully down the main hallway. It was Amy from HR. She had a file folder in her hand and a completely unreadable, stoic expression on her face. She must have just gotten Trey's email. Amy walked right up to the scene. She didn't even glance at the papers on the wall. Her focus was entirely on Jet. "Jet," Amy said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the hysteria. "My office, now." Jet spun around to face her. "Amy, thank God. Someone has to be held accountable for this. This is the most unprofessional, misogynistic attack I have ever witnessed." Amy didn't flinch. "We can discuss that in my office," she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Let's go." Jet seemed to realize she was making a scene. She tried to compose herself, smoothed down her jacket, and followed Amy down the hall, muttering about lawsuits and workplace safety. The moment they were gone, the office erupted in quiet chatter. About an hour later, my desk phone rang. It was Amy's assistant. "Amy would like to see you and Trey in her office, please." Trey and I looked at each other. Game time. We walked to the HR department in silence. Amy's office was neat and professional. She gestured for us to sit down. Jet was nowhere to be seen. "I received an anonymous email this morning," she began, opening the folder on her desk. It contained a printout of the full email chain. It contained some very serious allegations against Jet, supported by this evidence. She looked at us. The email stated this was found during a security audit. "As the head of IT for this floor, Trey, can you confirm this?" Trey was brilliant. He turned into the most boring, technical IT guy you've ever met. "Yes," he said in a monotone. "We have automated flags for certain keywords to prevent data leakage and ensure compliance with company policy. These emails triggered multiple flags for unprofessional language and potential HR violations. As per protocol, the findings were forwarded to the appropriate department. It was the perfect corporate speak explanation, plausible, professional, and impossible to argue with." Amy nodded slowly, accepting the story. She had no reason not to. "And Hassan," she said, turning to me, "you had a conversation with Jet recently about the posters she put up, correct?" "Yes," I said. I expressed that several team members felt they created a hostile atmosphere. She dismissed my concerns. Amy just nodded again, making a note in her file. "Thank you. That's all I need from you two for now. You may go back to your desks." We walked out, and as soon as we were back in the main office area, we saw it. Jet was walking out of her office, carrying a cardboard box filled with her personal belongings. 2 security guards were with her, a standard procedure for a terminated employee. Her face was pale and blotchy from crying. She refused to make eye contact with anyone. She walked the long walk of shame through the department, past all the people she had belittled and antagonized. Nobody said a word. Nobody gloated. We just watched her go. The door to the stairwell clicked shut behind her, and she was gone. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the entire office. It was over. Later that day, the director of our division called a brief meeting. He was a no-nonsense older guy. He just said that Jet was no longer with the company and that he apologized for any disruption her management style had caused. He announced that a new internal manager would be appointed soon, and that was it. The next day, the breakroom walls were bare and clean. The tension was gone. People started talking to each other again. The guys started eating lunch in the breakroom again. It was like a dark cloud had finally lifted. That afternoon, I went to get a coffee. Trey was already there, leaning against the counter in the same spot he'd been standing in when this whole thing began. He watched me pour my coffee. He gestured with his chin towards my mug. "Careful," he said, a ghost of a smile on his face. "Looks a little salty." We both started laughing. It was the best cup of coffee I'd had in months.